I used to think freedom was a bigger paycheck or a door that opened into some brighter room where I would be a better man with better clothes and a better posture. But it turned out freedom had gotten small and noisy, like the brittle chirp my phone made each time the app told me I could split a payment into 4, then 8, then more, each notification like a sugar cube dropped into weak coffee, dissolving sweet and invisible until the mug was empty and my hands were still shaking. And by then the hallway rug had learned the weight of boxes and my closet smelled like paper and cedar, and a faint synthetic perfume from stores with bright lights, where every mirror makes you stand taller than you feel. I remember the first coat I bought on delay, late autumn, the radiators ticking in the apartment, the windows gathering thin film from the street, my wife asleep turned toward the cold side of the bed, and me standing in the bathroom under a humming fan trying the coat on and off, studying the shoulder seams and the way the fabric folded at the elbow like a promise I was trying to believe, not a lie yet, not quite, only a future advance on some better self. And I told myself it was risk management in a human shape, a way to stretch cash flow through ordinary time, that there were worse things than paying in installments while the rest of my life caught up. I knew people who chased the stock market, who swore by Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, who woke to red candles and spoke in a language of income and passive income and debt instruments, as if the day itself was a spreadsheet, and I was not like them. I was just filling the gaps in a tired wardrobe the same way I filled the cracks in the window frame with a bead of sealant before the first snow, sensible and small and almost invisible until the numbers found each other in a dark corner and multiplied. Mornings became a friction of paper and tap water and small preparing thoughts, the kettle with a chalk line near its base, the thin cough of the espresso machine at the coffee shop near my building, the warm cardboard sleeve around a cup that burned my fingers anyway, and on the bench by the tram stop the catalog of my wants slid into my mind without permission, the green sweater with a collar that sat just right. The boots with soles that would make asphalt feel like a soft path through woods I had not visited since childhood, the shirt that claimed to be wrinkle-resistant but arrived eager to crease. And it was so easy to say yes when the button offered 4 payments with 0 interest and a bright bar that pulsed like a heartbeat as it approved me. I told myself I was in control because I could still fit everything in the closet if I pushed hangers close and layered shirts like pages in a secret book, because I kept the thermal paper receipts folded into a glass bowl on the dresser, as if proof of purchase could also be proof of wisdom, because the app showed cheerful checkmarks beside each plan and a calendar of pay dates that looked like a neat lawn after rain. And when my partner at work mentioned tightening a budget in a tone that tried to be casual, I said nothing and nodded and thought of the coat's lining, the smoothness against my wrist, like a word for comfort I had been missing. The first time I missed a payment, I had been up late with a spreadsheet for other things, not investments or anything grand, only the ordinary columns of rent and groceries, and a kid's winter boots and a transport pass, the kind of simple math that should make a man feel solid and instead made me feel porous. And a notification arrived while I was counting, a polite nudge swaddled in soft blues and rounded corners, and by morning the fee had attached itself like a burr, small but clingy. And it felt ridiculous that such a light thing could catch and hold and not let go. I told myself it would be fine if I ate leftovers instead of ordering lunch, if I walked home instead of taking the bus, if I brewed tea twice in the same leaves. And these are not hard things, they are even good things, though there was a new wobble in the apartment as if the furniture had been rearranged while I slept, the dining table with 2 rings from cups that had sweated under pressure, the chair with a squeak that arrived the same week another package came, and I pretended not to connect those events. My wife watched the number of boxes without counting them, the way one watches the weather, and I watched her watch, and there is a kind of quiet that grows between 2 people when the real words are locked behind a door. Neither wants to open in case the hinges come off, and nothing in the world is as loud as the elastic snap of a shared silence. In the supermarket, I mapped costs like a scout, switching brands of rice and choosing the jar with the simplest label, hunting discounts, ignoring the magazine covers at the checkout that insisted success was visible in a man's silhouette. And at home, I cut onions with a small knife that needs sharpening, the smell rising into the room like something brave. And while the pan clicked and hissed, I scrolled the app and watched the progress bars and the totals, and the way my credit line had expanded with each clean repayment like a leash I mistook for a horizon. The closet filled with cloth that seemed to expect a better life than the one I could give it, fabrics that demanded particular hangers and breathing room, trousers that wrinkled out of spite if I looked at them with the wrong frequency, and there was a ridiculous morning when I dressed for work and realized I had become careful around my own possessions, stepping sideways to avoid scuffing a shoe, smoothing a cuff as if I worked for the shirt instead of the other way around. And it made me laugh and then not laugh at all. When my family visited, the hallway had to be staged so that coats could still hang on the metal rack without collapsing it, and I told myself these were small matters, and then I forgot to stop telling myself that, and small became the default, and the nights took on the sound of soft alarms that only I could hear. I kept the boxes folded under the bed because returns were part of the plan. I said that to myself like a prayer, that I would wear things only if they stayed in the threshold of perfect, that I would be rational and send back what did not earn its keep, that I would treat the closet like a portfolio and do periodic rebalancing, and the use of finance words to justify cotton and leather should have warned me. It should have felt absurd, and in the end it did. Though not before I had paid fees for being a few days late 3 cycles in a row, and once I typed my password wrong and froze an account, and on that day, the apartment dim at noon with a sky like gray dishwater, I sat on the edge of the bed with the boxes breathing under it, and thought how strange it is to be tethered to things that cannot love you. It was not a collapse like in those stories of a tech company or a startup imploding. No investors calling, no bank turning off the lights, only a sequence of small frictions that left me sweating on the tram and snapping at a child who only wanted to show me a drawing of a cat with a square head because the marker had dried halfway through. And later I put the drawing on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon and smoothed the crinkled paper as if I could erase my own sharpness. If there was a moment of decisive clarity, it came with a shirt I never should have bought and could not keep. A shirt whose fabric felt like dried leaves, crisp and whispering around the shoulders. A color that in the store seemed like late afternoon in a forest and in the apartment looked like stale tea. And I stood under the ceiling light that has never been quite bright enough, and I admitted I had been dressing a fear instead of a body, the fear of being ordinary and overlooked and not enough. And though no one had said it, it had been sitting beside me on the couch with an arm around my shoulders every evening, and I had fed it and given it pocket money. I took that shirt off, and in that small action a sequence started, a line of dominoes, but slow and gentle as if pushed by a child's hand, and I pulled the boxes from under the bed, slid a fingernail under brown tape still smelling faintly of gum, and set the folded clothes on the quilt my aunt had sewn, uneven triangles pointing this way and that like the kind of map you draw when you're lost, and the room filled with that soft thump of fabric on fabric, the air dusty with threads. And I opened the app and looked through return policies like a man learning a foreign language, careful and polite and a little ashamed. The next day I took the tram with 3 bags, and the day after with 2 more, and the bag handles cut into my fingers, and the train doors hissed and sighed like old friends. And at the first store, the fluorescent lights made everyone look washed and new, and a woman in a sweater with a lint pill near the collar scanned barcodes that beeped in a rhythm that felt like a hospital monitor. And I stood there without speaking and watched the numbers reverse on the small screen until they were back where they started. Not victory, but neutral ground, and in another store I felt the texture of the counter under my fingertips attempt to anchor me to something solid, and there is a kindness in ordinary surfaces we do not praise enough. Some pieces were past their window and would not go back. Some had tags lost under the couch or under a bed where dust learns to roll into little animals. And those I took home and pressed flat and folded with care, and carried to a charity shop with a wooden door that squeaked and a bell that rang as if it were perpetually surprised. And I set the stack down and breathed the mixed smell of detergent and old varnish that every such place has, and I thought of a man I would never meet finding a jacket and thinking he looked like a future version of himself, and the circle comforted me even if it was a small circle. The closet thinned and the hangers widened their stance and stopped squeaking like neighbors arguing through a thin wall, and I kept what felt honest on my skin, the jeans that had learned the curve of my knee, the sweater that did not advertise a life I could not afford, the coat that kept rain off while I waited for a late bus, and I found a shoebox of receipts and emptied it on the table and felt the weight of thin paper in my hands and began to write in a notebook with a cover that looked like a slice of bark. Not a budget that preached abstinence, only a list of what mattered this month and what could wait, and in the margins I wrote small jokes to myself so that the numbers did not feel like parents at a door. I deleted the app with the small long press that makes icons tremble and carried a trash bag to the chute with the boxes neatly flattened, and the hallway outside smelled like dust and the faint sweet of someone baking on another floor, and back inside I opened windows to let colder air come in and hit the radiator metal, and make that music it does around 7, like coins in a pocket. And I made soup from carrots that had softened at the tips and barley that rattled in its jar like polite applause and thyme crushed between my fingers, until the kitchen smelled like a hillside I do not know but can imagine. There were days after that when I was anxious for reasons I had not yet faced, because the body learns to expect the hit of a notification like the body of a runner learns the corner where a hill begins, and I would catch myself touching my phone screen with the habitual reverence of a parishioner, and then I would go wash a cup or take out trash or sharpen the knife that had admired onions and remind myself that the air can be quiet without meaning something is wrong. My partner at work noticed that I wore the same sweater 2 days in a row, and that is a small thing and more normal than the alternative, and that day I stayed late to help shift boxes of brochures, and we ate sandwiches at our desks, and talked about the way winter light makes everything look modular, as if you could move a street like a shelf. And at home the apartment had an extra footstep of room, and my wife stood in the doorway of the bedroom, and did not say anything about what had changed, but breathed in and out once as if she had been holding that breath all season, and later I found her sewing a loose button on the coat I kept, and the thread ran through wool like a small train entering a tunnel, and that sound is the sound of repairs. The bills did not evaporate, the debt I had taken on did not erase itself clean as chalk, the calendar of pay dates still looked like a field marked for a game I did not volunteer to play, but fees stopped sprouting like mushrooms after rain, and I set auto payments to run the day after each check so I could not pretend forgetfulness was a strategy, and I put a note on the fridge with a number I wanted to reach, nothing heroic. Only a buffer so that groceries were not a panic, and a cracked tooth would be an annoyance rather than a catastrophe, and because I have been a man who listens to voices that sell dreams, I made a rule that the only podcasts I would play while cooking would be stories about people being good to each other, not tips on how to turn coffee into a startup or a pair of socks into a brand. I did not cut myself from the world. I still looked at the stock market, sometimes the way you look at a river you once slipped into and swallowed, remembering it's cold, and when a friend compared cryptocurrency charts to mountains and said we should climb them together, I smiled and changed the subject to bicycles and the perfect bread crust, and the fact that folded laundry smells like modest hope. And on weekends, I took a bag of cans and bottles to the machines and listened to their gulping and watched the little receipt print with a number and felt like the day was just fine already. The closet no longer made me feel auditioning for a future that kept rescheduling. It felt like a room with shapes I recognized, and when I put on the coat I kept and found a train ticket from months earlier in the pocket with a date I had half forgot, I felt the gentle tug of time. How generous it is when you let it be what it is instead of another credit line, and I thought of all the ways I had tried to finance joy, breaking it into installments. And how much better it felt to earn it by waking early, by carrying a bag of returns in a manner that made my arms ache, by making a soup that tasted like my grandmother's kitchen, even if the windows and plates were not the same. There are still moments when I stand in front of a window, arranged like a grid of squares, and see a man in a coat and think he might be better than me. And then one of my socks has a hole, and I laugh and go find the needle and try to make the circle into a line, and I fail and try again, and the thread keeps slipping and the sock keeps trying to be a sack, and finally the repair is ugly and good, a landscape of small hills. And I can put my foot back inside and feel the place where those hills are, and know that there is room in a life for imperfections that become signatures. Evenings have a rhythm now that does not depend on packages, a pot that simmers, a child's homework that has pencil smudges at the edges, a walk around blocks that smell like wet stone and detergent, the soft roar of events somewhere, and when rain collects in the lip of the windowsill and the drops fall one by one onto the concrete below, it sounds like someone counting money slowly, and maybe it is money in a way, time saved and spent, but I no longer measure it the way I used to. A while back I found an insurance document I had not read carefully, the kind of thing with dense paragraphs and commas like fence posts, and I sat at the table where the wood has a groove from my elbow and read it with patience and realized I had been paying for features that did not suit me, and I called to adjust it, and afterward the room felt cleaner though nothing had moved, and on that day I took out the glass bowl of receipts and made a small ritual of goodbye. Keeping only what a tax form might reasonably require and letting the rest go, and the way the papers slid into the recycling bin sounded like rain letting up. I am not a monk, I still buy things. The world still offers beauty for sale, and I am not immune to wanting. But I try to let the wanting pass through like fog instead of collecting into weather, and I try to name it when it sticks, To say this is me wanting to be admired, or to feel newer than I am, or to postpone grief, or to pretend this Tuesday can be traded for a better one. And sometimes naming it is enough to unhook the barb, and sometimes I take a walk instead. The kind of short loop that makes my hands warm in my pockets and my feet specific on sidewalks that hardly notice me. In the laundry room downstairs, the fluorescent light always flickers, and the machines hum like the ocean trapped in boxes, and I fold on the table and think of the layers of a life. The cotton and the wool and the receipts and the soup and the laughter that returns when you stop feeding silence, and I put away the clothes that remain, and because there are fewer of them I know each by touch, and that feels like ownership in the honest sense rather than the legal one, the kind that comes with care and not a countdown. If you open my closet today, you will not be impressed, and that is a relief. You will see a line of hangers that do not fight, a shelf where a sweater sits with patience, a pair of shoes that will keep me company for a few seasons if I wipe them after rain. And if you listen for a moment, you will hear nothing but the everyday noises of a building that is not expensive and not poor, someone dragging a chair, someone laughing in a language I do not speak, water clunking in a pipe. And somewhere a child learning a trumpet incorrectly and bravely. I took my freedom back in actions so small I almost missed them, in the press of a button to erase an app, in the slow walk through a store to counter with returns, in the quiet decision to keep only what worked as hard as I do, in the promise that the money I earn will serve us instead of trying to sell me a shinier version of me. And though I am no kind of hero and no conversion story that can be bottled and sold, I stand on the back steps in the morning and feel the chill of air on my teeth, and the world smells like leftover rain and someone's early toast, and that is a kind of wealth that does not require a password. When I lie down at night, I still think about numbers, but they no longer march. They amble like people leaving a cinema, talking softly about what they have seen, the budget line for groceries shaking hands with the one for savings, the little column of debt waving from down the block as it shrinks, the small fund I call cushion nodding as if we recognize each other finally. And sometimes I imagine income not as digits, but as hours I traded for the right to call this room mine for one more month. And that makes me careful and calm, and not inclined to swap those hours for a shirt that would make me feel borrowed. There are mornings now when I wear the same sweater I wore the day before, and I stand by the window with a mug that chips a little more each season, and I look at a city that remains indifferent and generous, and I whisper something I cannot quote because it is not quite words, only a feeling like the warmth of a hand you love on your back as you walk into cold wind. And it lasts until the kettle clicks off and I pour water and the steam rises, and it is just another day, and that is what I wanted without knowing it. Another day I can afford and inhabit without worrying I am late to someone else's idea of me. And if a sale sign tries to wave me in from a window, I wave back and keep moving, because the closet is light and the apartment is steady, and the bowl on the dresser holds only coins and keys, and not the brittle scrolls of my own avoidance. And the rug in the hallway does not remember the weight of boxes because it has not felt them in a while, and sometimes I kneel and smooth it anyway, just to say thanks to an object that had to be strong while I learned to be simple again. When the tram shudders in the rain, I hold the pole and feel the metal cold through my glove and see people composing their own private budgets of attention, some counting the stops, some considering a message, some looking at their reflections in black windows and deciding to be kinder than yesterday, and I join them with whatever kindness I can manage, and later, in the kitchen, I wipe a counter that will be dirty again, and it still feels like progress. And if I stand at the closet looking at the reduced shapes of my life and wonder if I have surrendered ambition, I decide I have not. I have only changed its definition, and it now includes the courage to live where I am, dressed for the weather I have, attentive to the people who share this room and this hallway in this city. And that feels like a garment I do not have to return, something that fits because it is not trying to impress, only to keep me warm. And on the shelf above the hangers, there is a small box with the receipts I kept for warranties and taxes, and I take it down sometimes to check a date, and inside it, there is a folded note from months ago where I wrote a promise to myself, terse and ordinary, that I would buy less and mend more and keep a week's worth of groceries safe in the pantry, and speak first when silence becomes a weight, and I have not been perfect. But the note is softer now from handling, and I think that is a kind of success that does not glitter but holds. And when the day ends, I drop my keys in the bowl and they clink like a bell, and somewhere a neighbor's kettle begins to sing, and a bus sighs, and a door down the hall clicks into place, and the world is the right size again, just big enough to house our lives and small enough that every object gets to rest where it belongs, and tonight that includes me. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.